desktop web environment, and they were able to just within a very short amount of time transition that out to a web-based presentation and interaction for their users to enable literally tens of thousands of end users to be able to access these data assets, these types of reports, interactive search, and other sorts of interactive business intelligence capabilities, pretty much from any device that their user base would want to leverage, including smartphones and tablets.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody enjoyed the party last night. I'd like to thank Dell Boomi for sponsoring the event. It's always a great time. Also want to, again, thank our top-tier sponsors, Oracle, IBM, SafeNet, and Grant Thornton, and also Dell Boomi as themselves. So it's a tradition. Every year, our next presenter always gives the opening keynote right after the Dell Boomi party the night before. So I'm gonna turn it over to our partner for the event, Treb Ryan, CEO of OpSource.
I am high in the sky, looking at you. I can read your mind. I am the maker of rules, dealing with fools. I can cheat you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank our sponsors last night too. Not only did Dell Boomi throw a great party, which is why they give me the first presentation after a Dell Boomi party, knowing that half the people wouldn't be there. They had some special guests, and I don't know if you all noticed that, but one of my all-time favorite bands from the 80s did arrive at the party and performed as us the Alan Parsons Project starring Rick Nucci. So Rick, thank you for coming out with the rest of the Alan Parsons Projects and making us a really special event for us last night. I wish he was up this morning. So this year we're going to talk about private clouds, public clouds, and hybrid clouds. And I was having a real hard time coming up with what I wanted to talk about this year. We've been spending a lot of time integrating in with Dimension Data. We're part of the Dimension Data family now, the Dimension Data Cloud Business Unit. We had to pick out a mascot for our new organization. We decided on the Rhino partly because Dimension Data is based in Africa, and partly because the Rhino may not be able to see very far into the future, but he charges as fast as he can to get there. So we thought that was a pretty appropriate for our cloud business group. But I didn't want to just talk about Dimension Data. I wanted to talk about, as always, something that was important to the group and something I was feeling passionate about. And I've been so involved in internal, I was having a hard time coming up with what I wanted to say. But then some things happened over the last couple of months that made it crystallize. I would probably have to take this half hour to explain myself, and I decided to do that. Back in February, Dimension Data did announce its new suite of cloud products under the Dimension Data brand name. Some of those are very familiar to anybody who's worked with OpSource. They are the OpSource Public Cloud. OpSource is managed hosting and application operations services. But we added some new ones that we've been working on over the 9 months specific to the Dimension Data brand, most specifically the ability to do private clouds. This came out on February 23rd. On April 8th, I was at a conference that was being attended by our friend Rihanna, and she put this tweet out. Treb Ryan says he's not a fan of private clouds, and then was retweeted about 14 times that I do not like private clouds. About 30 seconds later, half of Dimension Data were sending me emails. It was nice to see they're actually checking the thing, saying, what is that about you not liking private clouds? We just came out with one last week. And I realized that there was quite a bit of disdain going on the tweets, and it was getting me in quite a bit of trouble. So today, I'm going to explain what I meant about why I don't like private clouds, because I did say that. I said I don't like private clouds. I'm not a fan of them. I have never been, and anybody who's seen me speak in the past knows that. And there's some reasons why I'm not a fan of private clouds. The biggest one is I don't think they actually give people what they like about the cloud. I've always said, that the cloud is about the internet. It's why we call it the cloud. It's the drawing at the top of the picture that represents the internet. And using the internet for business purposes, whether it's infrastructure or software, for business process in ways that have not been done before. And what people like about the cloud is not the technology that drives it. It's not virtualization or multi-tenancy or anything. What they like about cloud is how they get to use that technology, what it provides them. And it provides them immediacy, flexibility. People love being able to do stuff right away, do it fast, and then stop doing it. And public cloud can do that, and private cloud cannot. The second thing they love is ubiquity, the ability to get stuff anytime, any place, anywhere. Not to have to worry about where I am or how I'm going to access it, always get to what I need whenever I need to get there. And of course, with the advent of what we can do on mobile on any device in any way. Private cloud doesn't have that often because of the lack of connectivity. Collaboration, the ability then to not only do it for myself, but to do it with others and to share back and forth on information and data and work together on that. Obviously, private cloud has a very difficult time making those things happen because it's dedicated to just one organization or group of individuals. Constant innovation. The cloud always changes. There's no one ever said, let's wait till the next version of Google before I upgrade. I'm going to stay on the last version of Google and just go through this upgrade cycle and not upgrade to the next feature sets. With cloud, things are constantly changing, and you're constantly getting those upgrades and changes, and they work right every time. And private cloud was really struggling with that, and this is a very big issue we'll talk about further on there. And finally, it's infinite. It never runs out. This is something that we've learned is a humongous driver of why people really enjoy using cloud-based systems. There's never a question of you being out of users or out of servers or out of storage. It was funny, we got asked as we're training through Dimension Data, a very simple question, and I didn't really know how to answer it. And it took me a couple months where, we have a system where you can turn a server off. And when you turn the server off, it doesn't go away, but you're not paying for your CPU or your RAM or your OS licensing. You're only paying for what's stored, and you can turn it right back on any time, and it's as fast as it can turn on, the server comes back fully configured, ready to go. But you do have to pay for the storage, of course, because we're not deleting it. I got a request from the product group in Dimension Data to put how we explained, do we reserve CPU and RAM to go with that, to ensure that the clients always had CPU and RAM? And I said, no, we don't reserve CPU and RAM, we don't need to. What do you mean? I said, it's like water coming out of a tap. You don't need to reserve that to make sure that when you turn on the tap, water comes out of it. It's the cloud. The water always comes out when you turn on the tap. And these are the essential experiences that people like about using the cloud and that appeals to them on public cloud and is not what they're getting out of private cloud. But there's more to it than that. There's more to why my disdain on private clouds. And that's really how private clouds have been going and being sold out to the organizations and the group out there. We've had a lot more experience now getting into the hardware world as of late, and it's having experience on how private clouds are being sold into the enterprise right now. And I'm completely convinced that a large percentage of private clouds is designed as a way to get more hardware and more software and shove them into the customer's account. Not that they're cost effective or anything. It is, I can tell you there are architectures out there, I won't name any by name, that are designed to have certain pieces of hardware sold, whether they have any impact on the ability to provide private clouds or not. But they're going to be bundled in there. The fact is a large portion of these things, we've had an interesting revelation as we work with both service providers and with enterprises now on private cloud. Stuff that service providers who have to make profits would never buy are being sold to enterprises every day as part of private cloud. Does it have any impact on the service or the quality? No. But the enterprise will buy a bundle, and they don't have to make profits on it, so they don't have the same P&L responsibility a service provider has, and ends up paying for stuff they don't need and they don't use. So hardware guys, software guys are selling these private clouds. You have all the things that are, to me, antithetical to the cloud. Big upfront costs. CapEx, CapEx, CapEx. $3.6 million to go put 2 of these in for one of our clients. $3.6 million. Doesn't sound like 4 cents an hour to me. It sounds like 3.6. It's designed to maximize the hardware sales. It takes forever to install one of these things and get them up and running. Forever. 6 months, 12 months, not uncommon from the time we see a purchase go in to when they get used. As a matter of fact, as you see down there, and I can guarantee you right now, I know because we have clients asking to buy them back from them, is for the first time, I'm seeing hardware turn into shelfware. You know, I always say that the cloud infrastructure, what we do is a marrying of infrastructure and software. And I'm like, great, so now we have software to control all our infrastructure and APIs and to spin up, and we all have to be programmers and coders now. You can't just be infrastructure guys. But we took one of the worst elements of software, which is shelfware, and we're selling these private clouds, and they're not getting implemented. We have people who bought blocks of gear a year ago and are asking if we could take them back and implement something new for them. They're not getting done. And so we're seeing shelfware go back into the infrastructure on the private cloud. And you know what the worst thing about that is you pay for it whether it works or not. Unlike cloud, no one would go to the cloud and say, okay, I'm going to sign in for Salesforce or OpSource or anybody, and I'm going to sign up, but I can't use it for 12 months, but I'm going to still pay for it while I'm not using it. You pay for it when you start using it. You pay for it as you use it. If it doesn't work, you don't pay for it. When you buy something that sits on the shelf, it's depreciating just like you're paying for anything else. And that means you're paying for private cloud and not getting to use it. And that's been a real issue out in there. And this is driving my disdain. One last item, and this has been a big one for us in implementation of private and public clouds. We release every 2 weeks. Probably everybody in here releases somewhere no later than once a quarter for new things. We try to get new significant features every 6 weeks, and we do software updates every 2 weeks in the environment. You talk to the private cloud guys, and they'll tell you they're very proud that they're going to have a very fast turnaround cycle. They're not going to be slow like traditional software. They're going to get out a new release once a year. That means the client using private cloud, if they upgrade, which means, of course, they're still responsible for that. They're still responsible for installing the upgrade, making decisions, all the things about software. They're going to get features once a year. At best, they're 26 revs behind what they're getting in public cloud in terms of features and capabilities. That, we think, is just antithetical to how people want to use the cloud. So, why do we have private clouds then? If we just like them so much, there's actual real use case scenarios. It's not just about people saying, I want to hold the hardware, or I'm old school. Believe it or not, there are situations where public cloud cannot work for the client. And there's 3 areas around where private cloud is a must-have for clients: data sovereignty, latency, and customization. Data sovereignty, my favorite term. Somewhere there's a law or case that says we have to put data in a certain place. A lot of times that's just people being paranoid. There's really much less in terms of both case law and written law about where data needs to sit than people think. But there are laws that say data has to sit in certain places. There are laws that say that certain types of data have to be in Canada and cannot be in the US. There are laws that say certain data has to be in corporate data and government data centers and cannot sit in third-party data centers. And so as much as we'd like to say, and there's also a lot of uncertainty about what the laws actually are and where they work. And so as much as we'd like to say you can put everything in public cloud, there are legal implications for certain types of data and where it needs to sit. The second issue that really drives the need for public cloud is latency. I love the internet, but it's bound by the speed of light. 56 milliseconds round trip time from one coast to the other in the United States. And as much as I'd like to say we're all going to rewrite our apps with eventual consistency and asynchronous transfer and all the things that good web apps do when they have to deal with data, the reality is we have a bunch of apps that require very fast access to the data that they're interacting with. And unless your app is standalone, which is great for guys like us who are in SaaS and in cloud, it has to deal with a data source at a transactional level. It has to be often very close to that data source. And to do sub-millisecond transfer times, you have to be within the metro region. And unfortunately, a large percentage of the applications out there are written with the idea that they have sub-millisecond access time to the data. And unless you're going to have an environment where everything sits out in the public cloud in a public data center, you're going to have latency issues. And you might need to you might want to leverage cloud systems, but use existing data sources. And the need then to do is to build a private cloud nearby. And finally, the last one's customization. Someday you'll wake up and you'll be able to go to the public cloud and get everything you want that's in the private cloud. I mean, that's in your data center. We'll have a variety of storage. We'll have a variety of systems. There's already a lot more variety than there was 3 or 4 years ago. But the reality is it's a leverage and scale game when you build public clouds. You know, there's only so many different environments you can build based on customer demand. And it's not nearly today the flexibility you get. If you want to go in and run stuff that's all running on flash drives at some super high speed to run your application, and you want to use cloud servers to do that, that's not out there today. Not in the public cloud. So with the private cloud implementation, you can tweak out things like CPU reservations for certain types of apps. You know, in public cloud today, all the CPUs are pretty much reserved at the same, clocked at the same level throughout the organization. You may have a need for a higher CPU clock. You may have a need for higher storage or better IOPS. And while many of those are now becoming options, I'm very excited about some of the stuff we're going to see this year. The reality is that you've got people who still have to have some custom environments. So we know there are real use case scenarios that the public cloud can't address today. And some of them they'll never be able to address. I mean, data sovereignty laws are in our lifetime probably not going to go away. It says certain places have to sit in certain things, and there's not going to be a public cloud instance in every single data center. So how are we going to solve those? What do we answer those? And this is where we get into what our thinking is of that, and where we really believe the answer is there, is you don't want to build separate private clouds. You can resolve these issues by giving people private instances within the public cloud. You look in here, this is pretty typical. It came down a little bit on the side here, so I got a little offset here. But it's the one time I'll talk about this, but I'll talk about more the theory and philosophy behind this is every cloud has multiple regions, or anybody of any scale has multiple regions and multiple locations. It's not really all that complicated to build a region or extra location, and then through the software, the application itself, restrict who can use that. So in our case, you come in there, we just turned one up actually, and we did turn one up in Atlanta. I wasn't able to get the screenshot since my computer crashed yesterday. We turned one up in Atlanta, and for this client, when they log in, they see US East, US West in Atlanta. They don't treat that there's no separation from the public cloud instance. They just see a separate one. But that client is the only person who can see Atlanta. No one else can. All their data is isolated into their environment in their data center sitting in Atlanta, in their data center sitting in Atlanta. No, but they are not getting a new system. What are the advantages of doing this way as opposed to installing separate private cloud software? One is we can put them anywhere. Anywhere. You have a data center, we can put it in a pod. Yeah, obviously there's some requirements in terms of power and connectivity, but outside of that, if you have a data center, you can get a private cloud in there. You can get a node from a cloud offering in that data center anywhere in the world. So you have to put some stuff in Benelux. There's some laws around Belgian data transfer, and there are. They have them. We need to put something in Benelux. There's not enough clients in Benelux to build a separate data center in a public cloud environment. You can get yours in Belgium and put that through. You can pay for it like public cloud. You can go out there and pay. Now, unfortunately, you have to buy bigger chunks, but it's still 4 cents a CPU hour, 2.5 cents a RAM hour, and you pay for it only when you need it. You don't pay for it before you can log in, before it's available. You don't pay for it the day the hardware is shipped or the day the software is shipped. You pay for it the day you can log in and start using it. And if it doesn't work, if it breaks, you don't pay for it. You know, one of the great things about the service business that we're in is our clients don't pay for stuff if they don't use it, if it's broken. And in the private cloud, that's not the case. If a private cloud installed, software doesn't work, database gets corrupted, you know, the hypervisor crashes, you're still paying for that. But in this case, in public cloud or in a private in the public cloud, you can go out there. If there's a problem, you're going to be SLA just like the public cloud is. You only pay for what you use. You only get it, you only pay for it once you start using it. You pay based on the same metrics as public cloud. You obviously have to pay for more because you're paying for the entire capacity that's been dedicated to you. 250 CPUs of capacity, you're going to buy all 250 CPUs of capacity. And then it's going to be, but it's going to be SLA'd and supported just like the public cloud is. And here's my last favorite part. It's always compatible with the public cloud. One of the biggest discussions we get into over and over again is the concept of hybrid clouds. We saw some great announcements recently with Eucalyptus coming to an agreement that Amazon isn't going to try to keep, to be blunt, messing with them by making sure that their stuff wasn't compatible, which was a set goal from Amazon for quite some time, to make sure that the APIs, that you couldn't copy their APIs, to instead saying, hey, we want to work together, so if you do have a private cloud, we can have a hybrid environment. But we've seen very few of these true hybrid environments out in the wild. Very few of them. And there's a big reason why. Besides the fact that this is new and who's buying, is that it's exceedingly difficult to keep your private environment synced with your public environment. As new features and sets come in, cloud environments get changed all at the same time. But private cloud environments, that means you have to make sure you're updating and upgrading your software at the exact same pace your providers are. You have to be running the same version of the APIs with the same version of the code no matter what happens. And if your provider has done 52 or 26 updates over the course of the year, you're going to have to figure out how I'm going to do 26 updates over the course of the year in my private environment as well. And it's very difficult to do. If you do this within the public cloud, private within public cloud, every change to the environment, public or private, happens simultaneously. If we add a new feature, for example, cloud software, the ability to buy licenses for other things besides just OS on demand within the environment, so SQL Server or other infrastructure stuff, you can go buy on demand. That's available not just to the public cloud people, but the private cloud people the day we release it. So you get all the benefits of the innovation that comes around a cloud environment while still having the private environment. It's not perfect. As we said, there's some disadvantages. One of which is that you have to buy the chunks. And those chunks don't come, and we're working on ways to think about how you could actually order a chunk. But the reality is if someone wants an extra 100 terabytes of storage out in the Benelux in a private cloud environment, someone has to figure out how to go install that 100 terabytes. And as a result, the private cloud is not infinite. Sometimes you turn on the tap, and there's no water left in the tap, and you've got to go either online or through your rep and order more water for your tap. We can do a lot of things, but we can't have an infinite supply of stuff sitting inside your data center ready for you to use at any time at no cost. Unfortunately, we haven't figured out those business models yet, but it does mean, and I think that's going to be a big issue. I personally am a big believer that people, when they hit that point where when they turn on that water and the tap's not there, that's going to go, they're going to say, hey, you know what? Here's a bunch of workloads I could probably just go put out in public cloud. I don't need to have that on private cloud. And hey, all I have to do is switch one line in the API to say, don't put it in Atlanta, put it in US West. And now I just solved my problem without having to go through a long wait. I got the immediacy and flexibility, but I still was using private cloud for the workloads I have to. With that, I've got about 5 minutes left. 4. I will open it up for questions. Bill.
Treb, great presentation, and you really outlined the issues clearly, I think, for an enterprise decision maker. If you're an ISV and you've got a big customer base and you're delivering a SaaS application stack, is there a case for building that as a private cloud rather than using a public cloud resource?
We've talked about this too for the data sovereignty issues for those clients as well. And that gets tougher, right? Because obviously infrastructure is a little more ubiquitous. And could you go out and build that for a client? That said, I'll give you guys some thoughts for anybody who's early on in building out SaaS apps. We work with a lot of SaaS application companies, And obviously, we took a lot of what we learned from our best clients and we implemented it ourselves. And one of the biggest problems with multi-tenant SaaS apps is how you start going beyond your first location, right? You know, when Salesforce first went to their second data center, it caused a number of outages. And the idea that, hey, I have one single location, it's multi-tenant, and that's great, but eventually I'm going to get to a scale where for both resiliency, for lower latency, for getting to international clients and data sovereignty, I'm going to have to deal with multiple centers. And you need to think about that when you write your app. And, you know, I never understood our guys when they kept saying we have this concept of regions and locations. I'm like, what do you mean? We just have locations. Well, it turns out our guys, for example, have figured out to write the software for a region, and that controls all of the locations within a region. And a region for us is a major geography. Australia, Africa, North America. These are anything within that region is controlled by one copy of the software. Now the data then, it can sit anywhere at that point. So you can have a client who says, I'm logging into your software, I'm dealing, but I have to have the data sitting in my data center, I have to have the data sitting in Canada. You can actually have the software put the data in Canada. It doesn't have to be in where the person's interacting with the application. The important part is where the data sits and where the systems, for data sovereignty reasons and for latency reasons, for interacting that. So when you think about how you build these modules, think about how someday you're going to have to deal with multiple data centers. You're going to have to do it anyway. You may not ever decide to go, it's worth it to go put stuff into a customer site, but if you build that way, that you can use an East Coast and West Coast data center, and you have the right scale, you should be able to also say, I will put, when it writes that data, this one's going to stick here, and this one's going to stick there. It's transparent to you, client, how you use the application. I still run it as a multi-tenant app, but the app knows based on the user and where they have, where the data is supposed to sit to hit your data sovereignty or your latency reasons. There's less on customization for software. That's handled mostly through the stack. Most of it will be data sovereignty. You can say, I can stick the data, go and log in, add a user or add a customer. That customer gets added. Everything happens through the app, but when that customer gets added into that data store sitting in that data center. And the app should be able to handle that and be able to do that transparently for the client.
Yeah. Maybe one final question on data sovereignty. We covered it a lot, but I think it's a big issue for smaller ISVs that now can ship a CD to Europe and there's no problem. But you had said that the data sovereignty issue, data locality, was a big reason to have private clouds. But the industry and you are addressing it as you're discussing. So the reality is smaller ISVs need to learn how to deal with that in the public cloud. So I'm not quite sure what is necessary in order to go to private cloud for reasons of data sovereignty when it can be addressed, I think, within the public
well,
cloud.
and thanks for that one. I'll go straight sales pitch. You should work with OpSource because we have all those locations already in place and much lower than building out each one on your own, right? And so the ability to go into Amsterdam or Africa, and unfortunately there's no pure coverage, but the ability to do that cost effectively is easier for smaller ISVs by working with partners. I wouldn't recommend anybody go out and build their own data centers.
So one of your 3 reasons for having private clouds isn't really a reason with OpSource because you can handle that in the public cloud.
Right.
Okay, so that leaves 2 left, I guess. Thanks.
And you're always going to have to balance that. For us, not everybody's going to get private cloud because they're expensive. You know, if we can solve the latency problem, and it's interesting, we offer 2 options. One is private cloud within one of our centers, which is cheaper, and one is private cloud. You don't have to buy as much as the better thing. Cost is always the same on a unit basis, but you don't have to buy as much. If you put it in your center, you have to buy more. Why would people want to put private cloud in one of our centers? That comes down mostly to customization, and if there is data sovereignty issues about shared storage, which there are some use cases. And let's be blunt, guys, I personally wouldn't do it. Some people just want to know that they have their own data store. And we can argue all day long you don't need it, but they want to have their own data store for either perceived reasons or for real legal reasons. They want to put them into place. Well, good. We'll be here for the rest of the day. If there's any follow-up questions, check us out at DimensionData.com cloud, or send me an email at trev@opsource.net. Thank you.